Strength was never built in comfort. Not by warriors, not by Stoics, not by any soul who chose mastery over ease. In the ancient world, resistance was not an obstacle. It was the path. A young warrior once asked his mentor, "Why life felt so heavy? Why fear followed him even in silence? Why discipline burned like punishment instead of purpose?" The mentor did not answer with comfort. He pointed to the stone steps carved into the mountain and said, "Walk them every day, even when nothing is chasing you." This was the ancient system: voluntary resistance, chosen hardship, daily friction against the ego. The Stoics understood something modern minds resist. Strength is not forged in moments of crisis, but in rituals of quiet difficulty. Cold mornings, unrewarded effort, silence when the ego demands noise. This story is not about suffering for its own sake. It is about presence, about training the spirit to stand firm when fear arrives uninvited. Through a warrior's daily resistance, physical, mental, emotional, we witness transformation, from avoidance to acceptance, from impulse to mastery, from fragile confidence to grounded strength. This is how Stoics built unshakable power, not through domination of the world, but through discipline over the self. He believed peace meant avoiding conflict. He believed silence was the absence of struggle. And for a long time, this belief kept him comfortable and weak. The warrior had trained his body since youth. Blades, forms, repetition until muscle obeyed without thought. From the outside, he looked disciplined. From the inside, he was constantly retreating. He avoided cold mornings, avoided difficult conversations, avoided stillness because stillness revealed fear. This is where most men begin. Strong in appearance, fragile in presence. When discomfort arrived, he distracted himself. When fear surfaced, he justified it. When life pressed down, he looked for relief instead of meaning. Modern psychology would call this avoidance behavior. The nervous system choosing short-term comfort to escape perceived threat. Ancient wisdom called it something simpler, a refusal to carry weight. The warrior did not know this yet. He only knew that something was missing. At night, when the world quieted, his mind grew loud. Unfinished thoughts, imagined failures, a constant negotiation with fear. He mistook this noise for thinking, but it was the ego, desperate to maintain control, desperate to avoid resistance. Then came the mentor, not announced, not impressive, just present. The mentor did not correct his stance or test his strength. He watched how the warrior breathed when challenged, watched how his eyes searched for approval, watched how quickly he sought comfort after effort. "You train to escape pain," the mentor finally said, "but strength is built by walking toward it." The warrior resisted the words immediately, not outwardly, but inside, where excuses form faster than breath. Pain was accidental, he believed, something to endure only when unavoidable. Why would anyone choose it? The mentor did not argue. He never did. Instead, he spoke of the ancient system, of Stoics who woke before dawn to hard beds and cold air, not because they enjoyed suffering, but because they refused to let comfort decide their character. Of Zen monks who sat motionless while their legs burned, not to prove endurance, but to train the mind to remain present under pressure. Resistance, the mentor said, was never punishment. It was preparation. Neuroscience would later confirm what these systems already knew. Exposing the mind to voluntary stress builds resilience. Cold effort, silence. Each trains the nervous system to remain calm when threat appears. But the warrior did not hear science. He heard challenge. His discipline until now had been external. Commands, schedules, expectations. Remove the structure and he collapsed. What you call peace, the mentor continued, is merely the absence of demand. True peace comes when demand no longer disturbs you. This unsettled him, because deep down he knew it was true. He had mistaken comfort for strength, avoidance for wisdom, and silence, real silence, terrified him. The mentor pointed toward the mountain path, stone steps worn smooth by centuries of feet. "Walk them every morning," he said. "Not because you must, but because you choose to. No reward, no audience, no urgency, just resistance, voluntary quiet daily." The warrior stood still, feeling the weight of the choice settle into his chest. For the first time, the struggle was clear. not against the world, but against himself. And in that moment, he learned that the path to strength does not begin with action, but with the willingness to carry weight without escape. The first morning, he almost did not go. The body resisted before the mind could speak. Warmth clung to him like a justification. Sleep whispered that discipline could wait one more day. This was the first lesson, though he did not yet recognize it. Resistance always arrives before clarity. When he finally stood, the air was cold and unwelcoming. The path ahead was empty. No witness, no applause. Each step up the mountain felt unnecessary. Pointless effort, the ego argued. No enemy to defeat. No reward to claim. This is where most people stop. Not because the task is hard, but because it offers nothing to the ego. His breath grew heavy. Legs burned. Thoughts searched for escape. Why am I doing this? The question repeated with every step. Not once did the mentor appear. Not once did encouragement arrive. And yet, something unfamiliar happened. The mind quieted. Not completely, but enough. Between breaths, between discomfort and desire, a narrow space opened. A space where he noticed sensation without judgment. Cold air entering the lungs. The rhythm of feet on stone. The sound of effort without narrative. Presence. The Stoics trained this deliberately. They believed the mind should meet reality as it is, not as the ego fears it to be. Neuroscience would later explain what was happening. Attention redirected from imagined threat to physical sensation reduces anxiety. The nervous system recalibrates when discomfort is not followed by escape. The warrior did not know these terms. He only knew the fear was quieter when he stopped negotiating with it. Days passed. The path did not change, but he did. What once felt punishing became precise. What once felt heavy became familiar. Discipline stopped feeling imposed. It became chosen. The mentor returned one morning, walking beside him without breaking stride. "You feel stronger?" he asked. The warrior shook his head. "No," he said. "I feel steadier." The mentor smiled slightly. "Strength is what remains," he said. After the ego loses interest, the warrior began to understand. This was not training for battle. It was training for life. When irritation arose, he noticed it instead of obeying it. When fear surfaced, he let it pass without action. When silence pressed in, he stayed. Each small act of resistance rewired him. Psychology calls this distress tolerance. Ancient systems called it mastery, not control over emotion, freedom from being ruled by it. One morning, halfway up the mountain, exhaustion arrived early. The old version of himself would have turned back. Instead, he slowed. No self-punishment, no drama, just presence. And in that moment, he realized something unsettling and liberating. Nothing terrible happens when you stop escaping discomfort. The mind had lied. Fear had exaggerated its authority. The weight he once ran from was now shaping him, quietly, consistently, without ceremony. At the summit, he stood in silence. No triumph, no relief, only clarity. The mentor spoke one final time before turning away. "You have learned how resistance builds strength," he said. "Now you must learn what it removes." The warrior watched him disappear down the path, knowing the lesson was far from complete. Because once discipline strengthens the body and steadies the mind, it begins its deeper work, dismantling the ego that once demanded comfort over truth. The mentor did not expand the training, he reduced it. No heroics, he said, no extremes. The ancient system was never about dramatic suffering. It was about precision. Cold water at dawn, not to shock the body, but to teach the mind that discomfort does not equal danger. Silent walks, not to escape people, but to confront the noise within. Uncelebrated labor. Tasks done slowly, fully, without recognition. The warrior resisted this simplicity more than the mountain. There was nothing impressive here, nothing that fed identity. The ego thrives on intensity. It wants challenges that can be displayed, narrated, admired. This practice offered none of that. The first morning of cold water, his breath seized. The body panicked instantly. Heart rate spiking, muscles tightening. The mentor's voice echoed in memory. Do not fight the sensation. Observe it. Modern science explains this clearly. Cold exposure activates the sympathetic nervous system, triggering a stress response. But when the individual remains still and breathes slowly, the parasympathetic system reasserts control. Ancient systems discovered this without instruments. They trained regulation through exposure. The warrior stood beneath the water, unmoving. Fear surged, then stalled. The mind searched for catastrophe, but none arrived. This was new. Fear, he realized, was not an enemy. It was a signal, one that grew louder only when obeyed without question. Day after day, the practice is repeated. Not harder, just steadier. The silent walks were the most difficult. Without sound, without distraction, thoughts surfaced unfiltered. Regrets, imagined futures, old conversations replayed with new endings. At first, he tried to control them. Then he remembered the mentor's words. Mastery is not suppression, it is non-obedience. He let thoughts pass, not pushing, not chasing. Psychology would call this metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe thoughts without identification. Stoics called it sovereignty. Slowly, the nervous urgency softened. The need to react weakened. Discipline stopped feeling like effort. It began feeling like alignment. He noticed changes others could not see. His breath deepened under stress. His posture steadied. His reaction slowed just enough for choice to appear. Strength was forming, not in muscle, but in restraint. One evening, while performing a task no one would praise, frustration rose sharply. "What is the point?" the ego demanded. The mentor answered calmly, as if present. "The point is that you do it anyway." This was the shift. Discipline was no longer something he did. It was something he was becoming. Identity replaced motivation. Neuroscience confirms this transformation. Habits tied to identity require less willpower. They operate automatically, below conscious resistance. The ancient system always knew this. You do not rise to discipline. You descend into it, until it becomes the ground you stand on. The warrior felt it now. Fear still appeared. Discomfort still spoke, but neither commanded him. Resistance had stopped being an enemy. It had become instruction. And with each quiet repetition, something deeper began to loosen its grip. Because once resistance trains the nervous system, it turns its attention inward, toward the ego that has been quietly negotiating control. The change did not announce itself. It rarely does. There was no moment of triumph, no clear line between who he had been and who he was becoming. Only small disruptions in old patterns. Where irritation once erupted instantly, there was now a pause. Where fear once tightened the chest, it now registered as sensation, nothing more. This is how real strength forms, quietly, beneath awareness. The mentor explained it one evening, as they sat without fire or ceremony. Your nervous system is learning a new language, he said. It no longer confuses discomfort with danger. Modern neuroscience supports this with precision. Repeated voluntary exposure to stress reduces amygdala reactivity, the brain's fear center. The signal still arrives, but it no longer hijacks the mind. Ancient systems trained this without scans or terminology. They simply watched men change. The warrior noticed how the ego fought hardest in subtle ways. Not during cold water, not during long walks, but during moments that went unseen, when no one noticed his effort. When his discipline produced no immediate result, when progress felt invisible, the ego thrives on reward. Take away recognition, and it begins to unravel. This was the true resistance: to show up without applause, to endure without narrative, to remain present when nothing validates the effort. One morning, exhaustion settled deep into his bones. Not physical, existential. The voice returned, "You have done enough." The mentor did not interrupt. This was a test no teacher could administer. The warrior stood still, feeling the urge to abandon the practice, not from pain, but from boredom. Boredom is resistance without drama, and it reveals character more accurately than suffering. He continued, not because of strength, but because of agreement. He had chosen this path. This distinction mattered. Stoics taught that freedom begins the moment you stop arguing with what you have chosen. Energy wasted on internal negotiation returns as presence. The warrior felt this immediately. Effort lightened, not because the work changed, but because the mind stopped resisting it. Discipline fused with identity. He no longer asked, "Do I feel like doing this?" He asked, Is this aligned with who I am becoming? Psychology calls this self-congruence. Ancient systems called it honor. With this shift, the practices deepened naturally. Silence grew longer, attention sharper. Emotions surfaced and passed without capture. Fear still arrived, but now it arrived like a visitor, not a commander. One night, as he sat alone, the mentor spoke quietly. "You are no longer training strength," he said. "You are training emptiness." The warrior did not understand. "You are learning what remains when the ego no longer interferes," the mentor continued. "This is where mastery begins." The warrior felt it then, a strange lightness, not happiness, not confidence. Space, the space between impulse and action, between sensation and story. This space was power. The ancient system did not aim to harden men into stone. It aimed to make them unmovable by illusion. And now, something fundamental was shifting. The practices were no longer shaping behavior. They were reshaping perception. The warrior saw clearly for the first time. Resistance had never been about becoming tougher. It was about becoming less reactive, less attached, less fragile. The ego was loosening, not through force, but through irrelevance. And in its weakening, silence began to feel different, not empty, but full. Because when the ego loses its grip, silence stops being threatening and becomes the place where true mastery is revealed. Silence no longer chased him. It waited. Where it once felt like a void, it now felt like ground. Solid, unmoving, patient. The warrior noticed this change not during practice, but during interruption. A sharp word from another. A plan undone. An unexpected delay. Moments that once triggered immediate reaction now created a pause. Not hesitation. Awareness. This is the threshold most never cross, where stimulus no longer dictates response. The mentor named it simply presence. Not calm, not indifference. Presence. The warrior began to see how the ego had once lived in reflex. Every insult demanded defense. Every discomfort demanded escape. Every uncertainty demanded control. Now something else stood between impulse and action. Silence. Not absence, but capacity. Modern neuroscience calls this prefrontal regulation. The brain's ability to override emotional reactivity with conscious choice. Ancient systems trained it without terminology, through stillness, repetition, and restraint. The warrior felt this capacity tested one evening. Another trainee, loud, eager, untempered, mocked the simplicity of his discipline. "No fire," the man scoffed. "No pain worth showing." The old version of the warrior would have answered immediately, words sharpened by insecurity. Instead, he felt the familiar heat rise, then settle. He said nothing. The silence unsettled the other man more than any response could have. Later, alone, the warrior questioned himself. Had he grown weak? Had restraint replaced courage? The mentor answered without judgment. "Strength that announces itself," he said, "is usually asking to be believed." The Stoics warned against performative virtue. Zen masters dismissed displays of control. True mastery, they taught, is invisible. Psychology confirms this. Those with emotional regulation show less outward dominance because they no longer need it. The warrior began to understand. Strength was not aggression. It was steadiness under pressure. Another test came with fatigue. Weeks of disciplined repetition accumulated in the body. Muscles ached. Sleep shortened. The voice returned, subtle this time. "You have earned rest." The danger of progress is believing you have arrived. The mentor watched without intervening. This was not about endurance. It was about honesty. The warrior sat in silence that morning, exhaustion heavy. He did not push through blindly, nor did he retreat. He listened. This was new. Stoic discipline was never about domination of the body. It was about alignment between intention and action. He adjusted slightly, reduced intensity, maintained consistency. Self-respect replaced self-punishment. The ego thrives on extremes. Presence lives in precision. That day, fear appeared differently, not as panic, but as doubt. Is this path enough? He did not argue. He observed the doubter's sensation, tightness in the chest, shallow breath, and it passed. Fear, he realized, was only permanent when resisted or obeyed. In stillness, it dissolved. This was the turning point. Resistance had stopped being something he endured. It had become something he trusted. Discipline was no longer enforced by willpower. It was upheld by respect for the path, for the system, for himself. The mentor spoke once more, his voice calm but certain. "You are learning the difference," he said, "between controlling emotion and not needing to." The warrior felt the truth of it settle into his posture, his breath, his gaze. Silence no longer threatened him, it strengthened him. Because when silence becomes strength, the final challenge is not fear or fatigue, but the surrender of the ego itself. The deeper the silence grew, the less familiar the warrior felt to himself. Not in a frightening way, in a clarifying one. Old reactions no longer appeared on command. The sharp edge of pride had dulled. The hunger to be seen had quieted. This unsettled him more than struggle ever had. The ego does not disappear quietly. It negotiates. It disguises itself as wisdom, as caution, as humility. One morning, as the warrior sat before dawn, a thought surfaced with unusual softness. "You have changed. You no longer need this." It was not temptation. It was permission, the most dangerous voice. The mentor recognized the shift immediately. "You are entering the final resistance," he said. "Not against fear, against identity." The warrior listened without defensiveness. "You once practiced discipline to become stronger," the mentor continued. "Now you practice it to remember who you are without strength." This was difficult to accept. Strength had become familiar, reliable, a place to stand. But ancient systems never allowed practitioners to rest in identity. Stoics warned against attachment even to virtue. Zen masters dismantled progress itself. Why? Because attachment, any attachment, creates fragility. Modern psychology mirrors this insight. When identity fuses with performance or discipline, stress returns. The self becomes conditional again. The warrior noticed it in subtle ways. A quiet pride when others faltered. A silent judgment when routines were broken. A tightening when someone questioned the system. These were not failures. They were signals. The ego had evolved. So the mentor did something unexpected. He removed structure. No cold water command. No scheduled walks. No spoken guidance. "Continue," he said, without instruction. This was more destabilizing than any hardship. Without external discipline, the warrior was exposed to internal honesty. Was this practice habit or understanding? Identity or truth? He sat in silence longer than before. Not practicing, just being. Fear appeared briefly, not of pain, but of emptiness. Then it softened. Neuroscience calls this default mode quieting, the brain reducing self-referential activity. Ancient systems called it no self. The warrior experienced moments where effort disappeared. Breath moved on its own. Awareness remained without commentary. No accomplishment, no meaning-making, just presence. This was not transcendence, it was simplicity. And it changed how he moved through the world. When insult came, it landed, but did not stick. When fatigue arrived, it was felt, but not dramatized. When uncertainty arose, it was acknowledged, but not resisted. The mentor watched silently. "You are no longer practicing discipline," he said finally. "You are expressing it." The warrior understood. Self-respect had replaced self-control. Awareness had replaced effort. Resistance had completed its work. The ego had not been destroyed. It had been put in its proper place. As a tool, not a master. Silence was no longer a technique. It was home. And in that quiet, the warrior felt something rare. Freedom without abandonment, strength without tension. The mentor turned away, already fading into absence. "There is one test left," he said. "Not one you train for, one you live." The warrior did not ask what it was. He already knew. Because true mastery is revealed not in practice, but in the ordinary moments where life tests who you have become. The final test did not arrive as a challenge. It arrived as loss. No warning, no meaning attached. Something familiar was taken, quietly, permanently. Not a blade, not status, but certainty. This is how life measures mastery, not through preparation, but interruption. The old warrior would have reacted immediately, tightened, resisted, demanded explanation. But the man standing there now did something unfamiliar. He paused, not to suppress emotion, not to appear composed, but because presence intervened before impulse. The breath moved. The body registered the weight. Grief appeared, not as chaos, but as sensation. This is the difference discipline makes. Emotion still arrives, but it no longer hijacks the system. Modern neuroscience explains this moment precisely. Regulated individuals experience emotion fully, without escalating it into narrative catastrophe. Ancient systems trained this without language. They prepared men for loss by removing their dependence on control. The warrior stood alone, no mentor beside him, no system to lean on, and yet nothing collapsed. The mind searched for blame, found none. The ego searched for defense, found no urgency. Fear visited, as it always does when the unknown opens. But it did not command action. It simply passed through. This was not numbness. It was clarity. The mentor's voice echoed, not as memory, but as truth. The path never promised ease, only steadiness. The warrior understood now what had been forming all along. Strength was never about resisting life. It was about meeting it without fragmentation. In earlier days, loss would have broken his rhythm, pulled him into reaction, shattered discipline. Now discipline remained, not as routine, but as posture. He moved through the day slowly, attentively, each action complete, each moment undramatized. This is quiet mastery, not visible, not impressive, but unshakable. The ancient Stoics called this ataraxia, a state of inner stillness, unaffected by external disturbance. Modern psychology calls it resilience, not toughness, but recovery without collapse. The warrior felt the absence where attachment once lived. Not hollow, open. He did not ask, why me? He asked nothing. This was the final offering of resistance, to let life unfold without demand for explanation. The mentor did not return. There was no need. Systems are scaffolding. They are removed once the structure holds itself. The warrior walked the same path he once climbed with effort. Now there was no struggle, just movement. The mountain had not changed. The practices had not changed, but the one walking had. Fear still existed. Pain still visited, but neither defined him. He had learned the ancient truth few ever embody. What you train daily, you become, and what you no longer resist loses its power. He carried no armor, no identity to defend, only presence. And in that presence, strength remained. Not because it was protected, but because it no longer depended on circumstance. Because the final mastery is not demonstrated in loss itself, but in how one continues to live after it. Life did not slow after the loss. It rarely does. Morning still arrived. Tasks still demanded attention. The world continued without pause or apology. This too was part of the test. The warrior moved through ordinary moments, washing his hands, tying his garments, walking familiar paths, with a steadiness that surprised even him. No effort to remain composed. No internal command to stay strong. Strength was no longer an action. It was the absence of resistance. The ancient systems were designed for this moment, not for rituals, not for isolation, but for continuity. Stoics trained daily so that when disruption came, there would be nothing to rearrange. Zen practitioners emptied themselves so nothing could be taken. Modern science now confirms what they intuited. A regulated nervous system returns to baseline faster after stress. Resilience is not endurance. It is rapid recovery without identity loss. The warrior noticed this. Emotion rose, fell, thoughts came, passed. No clinging, no suppression, just movement through experience. He understood now why the mentor had insisted on consistency over intensity. Intensity builds stories. Consistency builds structure. What had once felt like effort now felt like gravity, a natural pull toward presence. Days later, someone spoke to him of the loss, expecting reaction, sympathy, anger, collapse. He listened, thanked them, spoke simply. Not detached, not closed, whole. The mentor's absence was now complete. There was no inner dialogue asking, what would he say? The system had dissolved into understanding. This was the final stage of the path. Discipline had become discernment. Resistance had become clarity. Silence had become companionship. The warrior no longer measured himself against fear. Fear was simply another sensation moving through awareness. The ancient system had finished its work, not by making him exceptional, but by making him unshakable. He walked forward carrying nothing extra. No armor, no story, just attention. And in that attention, strength endured. Not because it was protected from loss, but because it had been trained without dependence. This is what Stoics meant by freedom. This is what warriors meant by mastery. This is what silence reveals to those willing to remain inside it. The path does not end. It becomes invisible. And the warrior continues, not resisting the world, not conquering fear, but living with a steadiness that no circumstance can steal. True strength is built when a warrior chooses daily resistance, not to fight the world, but to master the self.